everyone, it's Allison here, also known as Lasan Faye, and today I am here with a brand new video. Today's video, you'll notice this is not my bullet journal, and instead it's actually how I do self-care, and I don't use a Lloyd's term for it. Instead, what I am currently using is a Hobonichi that I purchased because I wanted to experiment with a Hobonichi, and originally I was really just interested in the weekly and the monthly pages, and I was trying to think of something to do with the daily pages, and I'm like, you know what, it'd be really cool if I just use the daily pages as a self-care log. And so that's what I'm here to talk about today, is how I've managed to incorporate all of that. So let's just go ahead, flip it up to one of the daily pages. All right, so this is how I do my dailies. For those of you who are familiar with the Hobonichi, like you'll recall that each day is on one page. And those of you not familiar with it, there is 1 day per page. And usually, so an example of a blank page, you have the date at the top, a couple of checklists, timeline down the side, and plenty of blank space to write in. And so really what I've done is I've filled in the blank spaces with things that I find important for self-care. So for example, one of the first things I do is I record the weather for the day along with the high and the low temperature. I'm just curious sometimes as to how these things work. And I do notice that my mood can reflect what's going on in the weather that day. I also note how many hours I slept, how many calories I burned, and how many of those calories were actively burned. And all of that I do using my Apple Watch or my iPhone. I just say, all right, phone, I'm going to sleep, or I'm waking up. It tells me how much time I spent asleep. And then the activity app that comes with the Apple Watch tracks how many calories I burn and how many of those I've actively burned. Then continuing down into the left-hand side, so where the time log usually is. Note, this is not events. Instead, you'll note that there is a strange sequence of 6 numbers that I record every so often. And what those 6 numbers represent are coming from up here. This is my mood tracker. And so for my mood tracker, when I initially created it, I surveyed a bunch of my friends and I was like, what are 6 things you'd like to feel every single day? And at the end of the day, I compiled that all into a list and pulled out the key ones that I felt really rang true for me. And actually, for the most part, everyone gave me the same 6 things. So what were those 6? The first one, given by the P here, is productive. So how productive am I feeling? The second one, I, is inspired. So am I inspired to do the work that I'm doing? E is for energy. So am I feeling tired? Do I feel like I have the energy to do what I need to do? S is for serene. It also notes how stressed I am at any given point. B is standing for belonging, so my connection to other people. Do I feel like I connect well with the other people in my life? Do I feel isolated from them? That's kind of what I'm measuring there. And lastly, C is for contentedness, which is like kind of general happiness with my life. So like A 10 on that scale is like life is really good. I wake up in the morning, I still want to be me. And like that's kind of the thing that I rate, is how much do I still want to be myself, or how much do I wish I was leading someone else's life. Which I'm sure many of you know, sometimes it turns out you don't want to be leading your own life from time to time. But I've gotten a lot better lately, and so that's why those numbers seem really, really high. I was actually having a good couple of days here. And also the placement along this time chart is actually the hour block in which I recorded my mood. So I can also check and see how my mood changes throughout the day. And that's because sometimes, I can wake up in a really good mood and then my day just spirals out of control and I end the day in a bad mood. Or I wake up in a bad mood, but I manage to bounce out of it. Or I just have like a little bit of a roller coaster during the day. That's why I actually also take into account the time of day where I'm checking my mood. And yeah, that's pretty much how my mood tracker works. The other thing that I track, now going over here to the right, is the exercise I'm doing. And yes, any of you who've ever taught before, you totally understand that teaching, being on your feet for like that whole time, having energy, that in and of itself is a lot of exercise. But I record like what exercise I'm doing, what type of exercise it was, how long I spent on it, and just in general, so that way I know whether or not how I'm actively burning calories is coming from my exercise or if it's just coming from natural movement throughout the day. Then underneath exercise, I also have a pain log. And with the pain log, I record where the pain I'm feeling is, what type of pain it is, what its intensity is, and if I used any form of treatment on it, then what did I do for treatment? I have a couple of nerve issues in my right arm, and so sometimes I just let it be, sometimes I stretch it out, sometimes if you look at my right wrist right now, I tape it up with kinesthetic tape, but all of it, I record it there. And this way, when I go and I see a doctor about it, I already have this log available. Then, of course, right underneath it, I just have all this space for journaling that I can use. And with the journaling, there's not a whole lot in terms of specifics, but it's more to record my feelings on the things that happen throughout the day, as well as like to note any upsets that might have happened during the day in regards to my mood, or like upticks, I guess. I also record what I eat, as well as what I'm drinking during the day. I'm not good at keeping track of how much water I drink, but I do note how much soda I drink, because I'm trying not to fall into bad habits with soda drinking. And then finally, as last thing I have on my daily pages, I have a little daily affirmation that I just write down and use for the sake of being like, okay, what's my affirmation for today? And for example, this is, I practice gratitude every day and thankfulness becomes my melody. And so it's to remind myself, to repeat that to myself and to use it as an affirmation. Yeah, and that's it on my dailies. Because otherwise, a lot of my other stuff I actually put elsewhere. So, for example, I'm going to throw that back in there so I remember how far back my dailies are. So, for example, on my weeklies, My weekly pages I use as a time tracking ability, and on the left hand side of any given column, I have color coded how I intend to spend my day on any given day. And on the right hand side, I follow that same color code, but it's how I actually spent my day. And I do this for the sake of being like, okay, am I actually following through on the plans that I have, and holding myself accountable for the amount of time I am spending on the various tasks that I have for school, for my job, for my own personal self-care, for like just fun things I'm doing. I just want to be able to keep track of all of that. And so that's what I do here. And sometimes, like, especially when I'm planning out the day, I'll write in what it is specifically that I want to do at that time, especially when, like, orange here is my teaching related stuff. And so I have scheduled tutoring hours that are up here, whereas down here I intended to do grading. The grading didn't happen because I actually didn't receive the assignment. So it was not because I decided to skip grading that day, unlike on Wednesday, where instead of grading I was just like, you know what, I want to play video games. And I then like wrote down which game I played after the fact. But I just wanted to be able to hold myself accountable for how I'm spending my time and what I'm doing in that time frame, as well as what I'd like to be doing in order to accomplish my goals. But that's really just how I use my weeklies. Nothing too big. And then the monthly calendar I actually don't use for self-care. Instead, this is my editorial calendar. Current month usually has post-it notes everywhere on it. But once I pass a given day, I actually go in and I write out what it is I managed to do that day for YouTube. But this was just a nice place for me to have all of that information. And then finally, the last piece that I have here is my year on 4 pages and how I use that. So what I use my year on 4 pages for is for correlation tracking. So the correlation between my quality of sleep, my mood, my activity, the quality of food that I'm eating, and my productivity. And these are just the 5 things I check, and the pens I'm using here are the zebra mild liners. And the highlights here on the side are for tracking my menstrual cycle, because I feel that that also affects my mood and how well I'm sleeping, how much I'm getting done, and how active I am. So I wanted to see how that influenced everything on the graph. Some trends that I noticed so far by already just doing this for 1 month is that, 1, my quality of sleep affects my mood. So if I sleep better, I feel better. Whereas if my sleep quality starts decaying, so does my mood. And the reason why I say quality of sleep versus hours of sleep is because I've had multiple forms of insomnia, and one of the main ones that reoccurs for me is I can get sleep, but I can't get restful sleep. And so I could sleep, say, like 8 to 9 hours, but feel like I only slept for 3 of those. And that's why I record this the way that I do, because sometimes it's not about the hours that you spend asleep in bed, it's about how you feel when you wake up from that sleep. And that's why I wanted to check that. The other thing I've also noticed is that my mood affects my productivity. So if I have a severe dive in mood, like here on the 20th, like my mood went from here and then suddenly dropped to like a 3. My productivity also dropped with the mood at that point. And all of these things kind of make sense, and discussing them with people who study psychology, they're like, yeah, no, that's really understandable. So it is a fairly common trend. At the same time, other things I've noticed, my quality of food does not affect anything, nor does the level of activity I'm getting affect anything. So I might drop those out of the equation here in June, just because I haven't really noticed anything. But you never know. And also, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know I generally actually don't like doing like monthly charts or trackers on a separate page from everything else. But there's a reason why this one works for me. And that is because all of the data represented here on this chart can actually be found on the daily pages in the Hobonichi as well. So it's okay if I forget to fill this out for a couple of days at a time. And yeah, that's why it works a little bit better for me than my habit tracker did in my bullet journal. I keep track of all of this stuff elsewhere, and this is really just to compile all the data into one space. And yeah, that's it for how I use this for self-care. And overall, things that I do want to point out, self-care is extremely important, and I'm glad that I've started doing this. And going through the process of tracking my self-care in something that encourages me to use it on a daily basis. I also really like the system that I have. I like the fact that the correlation chart, I can update that as I need to. My dailies, I just go into daily. And my weekly, I kind of just look at as I need to and fill it out also on a daily basis. And so really that's why these 2 bookmarks are in these 2 places. It's because they're the ones that I access regularly. Even though they're actually not currently on the pages that are representing today as I'm filming. I'm also glad that this information is not in my bullet journal, which, some of you planners might be like, le gasp, why is it not in your bullet journal? Like, this would be so easy to put in your bullet journal. And so a huge reason for that is this is a lot of space to take up for self-care. And right now, what I need my bullet journal for is to focus on my work more than myself. And also because it would take up so much space, I would run through any bullet journal that I would have super, super quickly. And I like the fact that the Hobonichi, I can actually see all this information across a full year and it's all in one place. Whereas if I were incorporating this into my bullet journal with everything else that I have going on, my bullet journal maybe would last 3 to 4 months at a time. And then I'd be having to pull out multiple books in order to see how everything changes over the year. Like, I've noticed in the past, I have general trends through certain parts of the year. Like, my mood will take a dip in the fall, for example. And I want to see, like, how it actually relates overall to the rest of the year. While it can all be in one space. So that's the reason why I'm actually glad that it's not my bullet journal, because I can put it all together. But yeah, that is it for how I use my Hobonichi for self-care. and I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I will respond to them, I promise. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video as well, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more videos from me, either in regards to bullet journaling, or actually mostly I do Zen Doodle on the account here. But go ahead, click that little subscribe button down below. I'd be happy to have more subscribers. And thank you so much again for tuning in. And please have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful, wonderful week. And I will see you all shortly. Bye.